Let's discuss the Zambian election further then. We're joined by Dr. Sishuwa Sishuwa, a Zambian historian and political commentator. Good to have you on the program in South Africa, Doctor, this afternoon. So you've got the observers from the EU and the African mission saying that there were issues about violence, fairness in campaigning, and there's internet restrictions on the day of voting. President Lungu says he also doesn't believe the elections were free nor fair because there was violence in some parts of the country. Does he have a point?
No, he doesn't. I think that is the statement he issued yesterday, which I assume you are referring to, where he declared the election as not free and fair. I think has is a reflection of the concerns of a losing candidate that are typical of electoral contest. But I think there are 4 or 5 major points that statement suggests. The first is that in laying the complaint that he issued in that statement, he's simply setting the stage for a petition. You know, that is not the position of a man who is prepared to gracefully concede defeat, as his predecessor did. But what you see in that statement is a concern to say, an acknowledgement that I've lost the election. But the reason why I lost the election was because of these isolated incidents of violence, which he quite conveniently limited to areas which are regarded as opposition strongholds. So that's the first point that you see in terms of the meaning of that statement. The second one is that it shows the abuse of state resources that have been characteristic of his rule. You know, the statement was issued on a state house letterhead. That was something that involved a party affair. You know, it should have come from a spokesperson, say, of the governing party, not a civil servant. But I think that the president has not been very clear in making those kind of distinctions, even in the past. But I think that the statement that he issued, the concerns he's expressed in that statement, is also premature, and it has no legal effect in essence, because if he's aggrieved, he should instruct his lawyers to collect the evidence, and then after the Electoral Commission of Zambia has declared the winner, then he can go to court. That is the procedure that is provided for in the Constitution.
And that
but it also suggests...
My next point, Doctor, pardon me for cutting you off, because the President then in that statement last night also says that you see a further abuse, if you will, of his political rights or electoral rights, because he says the Zambian Electoral Commission has continued to announce results even though he's lodged complaints or complained about the violence, including, he says, the killing of one of the members of his party in the northwestern province. I think it's the chairman there who was apparently killed last week in fighting there.
Right. Well, I think that what we should translate what actually that means. When the president says that, I think it suggests that the Electoral Commission is standing firm. There were reports that there were maneuvers to pressurize them into doing something that's not right. So when you see him complaining in public like that, it shows that his attempt, or the ruling party's attempt to intimidate the Electoral Commission at a point when it was demonstrating its independence had failed. And so he had to go public. But I think that it proves that the Electoral Commission is actually holding firm, because at law, you cannot stop the Electoral Commission from announcing, the results. What the president can do, not as president, but as a candidate for election, is to wait until the process is completed. The Constitution provides that within 7 days of the declaration of results, he can then lodge a petition in the Constitutional Court, and then he can present evidence to say this particular incident was so significant to the outcome that had it not occurred, I would have won the election. But the statement from the president, for me, was actually encouraging, because it shows how the ECZ, for example, is holding firm. And it also suggests that there are some divisions within the governing party in terms of how to respond to this defeat. I understand why, because see, the scale of defeat that the incumbent has suffered was stunning. Very few of us expected that he would lose that way. So even him, I understand that it's very difficult to accept. So we are seeing soft liners and hard liners within the governing party. The softliners, I think, are pushing for a negotiated deal, which I suspect we are likely to see an announcement maybe in the next 1 hour or two. But the hardliners are pushing for rejecting the election or the outcome. And I think that the public statement that you are seeing from some members of the governing party saying we are headed for victory, we want to concede a defeat, that is a reflection of the hardliners who have much to lose if the president, for example, concedes defeat. So you have those two factions that are playing out at the same time. I do think that Lungu is talking to the other side privately, but in public, I think the hardliners are reflecting a different position. In my view, this reflects the vision within the governing party about how to respond, what is the right approach here in terms of how we proceed. But we are likely to see, I suspect, in the next hour or two, major developments, including perhaps a concession from him, because at this stage, he must understand that conceding is very good for his legacy. You know, he should not show weakness even in defeat. What he can do now is say, let's get over this thing. The Zambian people have spoken. Obviously, we didn't get our message across, or we didn't listen. I accept the will of the people, and I'll work to facilitate a smooth transition and make sure that the next presidency task is made easier by my actions. That is in keeping up with the tradition, because Rupiah Banda, who was defeated in 2011, Kenneth Kaunda in 1991, gracefully conceded defeat and provided for a smooth transition, which also enhanced their legacy in subsequent years.
And Dr. Sishuwa, are Zambians or Zambia's democratic institutions strong enough to withstand a protracted battle over the outcome of this vote if it goes that way?
I think that is heading to the elections. You know, the public trust in many of the formal institutions that are crucial to managing electoral contest was very low. But what you start seeing in the last few days is a shift in terms of these institutions or the individuals within them actually finding their power back. Just yesterday, you had a statement from the Law Association of Zambia where they defended the Electoral Commission, saying, you know, the president, in effect, they were criticizing the presidential candidate, the Party Front Leaders for the president of Zambia, saying, if you have concerns, wait for the court process to take its course. Those kind of statements would not have been imagined not long ago, because some of these associations were seen widely as working with the executive. But what we are seeing in terms of those shifts is power slipping away from the incumbent. And many of these institutions, including the police, for example, are beginning to move away from, you know, working with, say, the executive, even when the interests of the public are affected, to finding their independence. So I have faith in the capacity of these institutions to rediscover themselves, because they see the results, the scale of defeat that the incumbent has, in my view, suffered is such that even the institutions or the elites within them will be scared to reverse the will of the people.
And the army was deployed this past week because of the reported incidents of violence in some provinces in Zambia. Now that we're sitting with a potential, or very real, in fact, election dispute, will the presence of the army in those areas, firstly, what is the status of that deployment, if I can ask you, and B, if it continues, is it going to be a stabilizing or aggravating force?
The military, I must say, that's the rank and file that was deployed on the streets of Lusaka and several parts of the country. Their conduct has been very professional. You know, the top brass of the military has tended to be loyal to the president, but the rank and file, you know, has been very professional and tended to stay above the partisan fray of politics. And their conduct throughout this period has been exemplary. They have not harassed people. They have made people feel that they are there to simply keep the situation safe. We don't have a situation in Zambia where the military is part of the state structure in terms of the ruling party, like you have in Zimbabwe and Uganda. Here, the army has been very professional, kept it to its side, and even when they were deployed onto the streets, it was the first time this was happening since 1991, for example, in the debated multiparty democracy. I don't think that many people were really concerned that the army could start beating people, because that is not characteristic of the honor soldiers. So I don't see anything, you know, affecting any potential dispute that may arise after the declaration of the results from the military side. What is likely to happen is if the incumbent president, the candidate of the Patriot Front, feels aggrieved after the declaration of the results, he will file an election petition. He will still remain president, but within 7 days of the declaration of the results, he can file an election petition in the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court has 14 days within which to hear and determine that matter. And at the end of that process, depending on the evidence adduced, they can declare the president-elect as the elected president of Zambia, or they can nullify that election and call for a fresh election. He's not expected, President Lungu, to step down during this process. He can only step down if the petition was filed against him. And again, I see a situation where that process, if it takes place, is likely to be very smooth.
Dr. Sishuwa Sishuwa, a Zambian historian and political commentator, speaking to us about the fallout now on the back of the elections. President Edgar Lungu saying the elections have not been free nor fair. Dr. Sishuwa, good to speak to you today. Thank you very much for your time.